Welcome to Men on Mission, a podcast brought to you by Men of the Kingdom. Our goal is to help encourage and equip men to live on mission for Christ 24/7. It's far too easy in our culture to sit back and to complain about the state of our world. But we believe that God calls the church to rise up and to take action, especially the men. With that, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Men on Mission.
Well, Nathan, thanks for joining us today. We're here with Nathan Weber. He's one of the key leaders in Men of the Kingdom, but he's also a man who really exemplifies a man living on mission. So Nathan went to University of St. Thomas. He played football there, and now he's also out in business, if you will. He's working in the wealth management field, and he's also led multiple Men of the Kingdom, as well as he was part of the 2020 Men of the Kingdom class. And you've now led, is it 3 different groups?
Co-led one and then led one other.
Okay.
Yep.
He's good.
Yeah.
And he's about to lead another one here starting
summer.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I'm super proud of you. You know, as a guy who's gone through the Men of the Kingdom and really grasped some of the key concepts, you really live it out. And you inspire me to be a better man, and just the way that you actively lead the people in your mission field. So every week we kind of start out with a couple different questions. You know, one of them, how have you been on mission this week?
Thanks for the intro. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on and inviting me on. To answer that question of how I've been on mission, I was thinking about that, and even just thinking about how do I measure that. And one thing that I was really thinking through is thinking about the AT&T questions and kind of using that as a barometer of how I was living on mission, and kind of measuring was I living for an audience of one, or was I living for what the world thinks about me? Was I living with an eternal perspective? And then where were my treasures in the last week? And I think when I think about those things, it's like, was I faithful in the small things, especially? And so I was really reflecting on that question, and was I being faithful in the small things? And I think I can look back at my past week and say, I think I was faithful in the small things of
That's awesome.
And how was I loving my wife? Like, how was I laying down my life for her? How was I pursuing other people, like in the workplace, and viewing them as an image bearer of God, those types of things. And so, those are just a few examples, but I think
I think that's awesome. And it is super evident just in the conversations that we've had that you live on mission 24/7 everywhere you go. But I also know as a leader, sometimes it's hard to always be on and to always be performing at such a high level. And even this last week, if we're thinking about those 3 questions, like who's my audience, what's my timeline, and what are my treasures? Like, there are moments where I'm on mission and I'm having amazing discipleship conversations with my students. And then there's other moments where I'm like really struggling to have my treasures be things that are eternal. And so for you, what's been an area where maybe it was hard to keep that on mission mentality this last week? Because we're all human. And it can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing is, where are my treasures is one question. Even just circumstances of looking at a house for my family, and thinking through that, and like, okay, am I looking to build a kingdom here on earth, or am I really looking for eternal treasures rather than just what can I accumulate here? And so
I appreciate your honesty on that, because that's a tension we all deal with.
Yes,
it's the 2 kingdoms that pull at our souls and our minds.
Yes,
absolutely. But it's awesome that you're thinking through that. And I know Dino, a lot of times with his property, he calls it kingdom property, and like he uses it so much to host and to be hospitable, and like it's amazing what we can do with the resources we have here on this earth.
Yes,
but it's so tempting oftentimes to allow them to be a good thing in and of themselves that we find our fulfillment in. Instead of being like a mechanism to be a blessing for other people.
To point to something deeper and something greater.
Yeah, for sure. But I just appreciate the honesty, because that's that's totally real, and it's a real struggle each and every day.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So since we're talking about being on mission, could you describe some of your mission fields? Yeah. How do you look at your week and your month? Describe those mission fields for us.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, one of the big takeaways for me from Men of the Kingdom when I went through it was there's no difference between the sacred and the secular. And that's something that I've really taken with me and viewing my entire life as a mission field, especially. And so the answer is wherever I'm going is my mission field, truly.
A for the day, right?
Yeah.
Preach it.
Yeah, but I do think that there are a few specific mission fields where God has really called me to and where I want to be living on mission, and I think I'm effective as well in those mission fields, and that's at home with me and my wife, and then at church and the ministries that I serve in.
What ministries do you serve at the church?
Yeah, the young adults ministry at Grace Church, which has been awesome, and then at work where I work, and so those are kind of my three mission fields, I think, primary mission fields. That's the way that I think about it.
Yeah, so you think about your mission field at home. Maybe let's delve into that a little bit. You're newly married to Emma.
Yep.
As you have learning, you're growing as a marriage, you're growing as a family. How is some of the 5 Ps, how have you looked at serving your wife on mission? Through the rubric of being a prophet, a priest, a protector, a provider, a projector of a kingdom vision.
Yes. Yeah. So of the 5 Ps, I think 3, all 5 are important, but 3 really stand out to me when I think about leading my wife, Emma, and just as a family. And that's being a protector, a provider, and then a priest. And so kind of breaking those 3 down in the way that I think about it. As a protector, I want to be certainly protecting my wife physically when we're out and about. And if anyone crosses that threshold of our home, it's like, I'm going to be there. But I think the other things that are important to protect from are spiritually. And how is she, are there any spiritual attacks? Is there anything in the world or in culture that's an attack on her and her character and who she is as a woman, and those types of things. So like protecting her from some of those things and knowing what I need to be protecting her from, I think is also really important. So kind of looking out in the world and seeing what are some of the threats that I need to be on guard against.
Is there any threat that, is there, talk about that, because I think that's really interesting. What kind of threats do you see coming at your wife and your family?
Yeah. I think certainly some of the movement toward like who a woman needs to be, that she needs to be independent and she needs to be building a career, and not that there's anything wrong with that. Like she needs to be doing more than that, or that's
you have to
attack on her identity.
You have to be career driven.
Exactly.
You can't be a mom if it's not enough to be a mom. Or
yes.
Yeah, I got you.
Yes. And so kind of like protecting her against that of like, that's not true. And I think it will apply especially when we're in that stage of life, Lord willing, if we have children, where it's like if any sort of attack of her identity comes in, I need to be on guard against that.
That's super wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we got to be, like the sons of Issachar who understand their times. And your wife and your mission field to be able to be a protector against the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Yep.
You have to both know your wife, but also understand what's happening in the culture. So I really appreciate you being on mission from that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think as a provider, that's another big one, is just thinking through, okay, certainly being an economic provider. I think that's what people think of when they think of being a provider for your family. And there's an economic component that's important, but the way that I think about it is I want to provide the best environment for us as a family to flourish, and specifically for my wife, Emma, to flourish. So yeah, I want to be creating that environment, and that can manifest in different ways. But that's just the way that I view being a provider. I want to provide an environment for her to flourish. And then as a priest, I want to be leading us to worship as much as we can in everything that we're doing throughout the day, and looking for opportunities to worship and delight in who God is.
Yeah, that's awesome. How have you been trying to cultivate that just in your marriage, just being the priest? And what does it look like? Obviously, going to church probably is part of that. And what's another kind of way that you've seen that play out?
Yeah, prioritizing corporate worship for sure on Sundays. And I think also for us, it's praying together. We pray together before bed every night, and before meals, and outside of that as well. And then I think also just encouraging her in spending time in the Word and pursuing the Lord, and having her personal devotion time. So yeah, that's one way. But also I think what I want to be doing as well, even now and then with children and family and stuff, is having family worship together, where we're worshiping together. And I don't know what that will look like yet, but really wanting to incorporate that into our family.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. That's huge. Super impactful. I don't know, I've just seen even in my own marriage how much of an impact it makes when I am doing it versus when I'm not like doing, when we're not in the Word together, when we're not going to church together, like there's a huge difference when you are versus when you aren't. And so that's awesome that you're being intentional about pursuing that and cultivating that in your family. How long have you been married, just for my sake and for everybody else?
A year and 4 months.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats, man.
So I'm a rookie.
Yeah, no.
You got a good start.
Yeah, you're starting off strong, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, even their wedding, your wedding was a celebration of joy, and everything just felt right. The way that you honored her during the service, the way that you were delighting in your wife at that point. And I've seen you as you continued to serve your wife and put her needs first before your own.
Yes.
You're leading your wife well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think, kind of tying back to even the first question of, I want to be faithful in the small things. Because I think when we're faithful in the small things, we're going to be faithful in the bigger things when they come. And so, like, simple things, I just think, like, really practically, of pursuing my wife on a daily basis, like laying my life down for her, finding opportunities to lay my life down for her, and seeking that out, pursuing her. I've heard this term, but I'm borrowing it, of mining her heart daily, of like trying to just mine down to who she is and who God created her to be uniquely, and just really continuing to pursue her in our marriage. And being intentional about that, because it's easy. You can have a really full week, and all of a sudden it's a full month, and all of a sudden it's a full year. And it's like, you haven't even taken a step back to be like, did I pursue my wife? And obviously we've only been married for just over a year. So, but I've seen that already in that year and 4 months of, it can be easy to have your head down and not intentionally pursue your spouse.
Yeah, so easy. The urgent swallows the importance.
Yeah.
So often.
Yeah.
And as you grow in your marriage, when you have multiple kids and multiple responsibilities in the job environment, it's easy to almost have two parallel tracks with your wife of expertise or domains that you focus on.
Yes.
So Scripture says we should delight in the wife of our youth. You're doing that.
Yeah.
And that's going to pay dividends in the future. And you're wise to be protecting your marriage by being faithful in the small things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's huge. One of the things you mentioned was just how important it is to continually lay your life down for your bride. And obviously that's what Scripture talks about in Ephesians chapter 5, and the type of leadership that we're called to exhibit. But I feel like a lot of times that can be a Christian term that we then struggle to translate into everyday life. So for me personally, I know one of the biggest, maybe not the biggest, but one of the most consistent ways that my wife is blessed by me putting my flesh to death is by just serving and doing the dishes. And like she'll always be like, no, like it's not that important. But like if it's not done, she notices. And if it is done, she's like praising me and like super grateful. So it's like one of those things that matters.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to be way more intentional about doing that this week. So what does it look like for you what's one of the ways that your wife appreciates you laying down your own self and serving?
I think that's a great example that you shared of just like what does our house look like? Like
Right.
what does our environment look like?
And just step into it.
Yeah, and stepping up to do the dishes or clean the kitchen when stuff piles up, instead of doing what I would prefer to do maybe in the evening or something. Like, hey, let's clean, let's tidy up the house and that type of thing. I think that's a really good example. I think that there are other ways too, and even just thinking through like giving up my preferences of like even what our schedule looks like, or navigating the family gatherings and stuff like that, and like where it's like, okay, this is important to her, like we're going to prioritize this, and maybe I would rather be doing something else or would rather have our schedule look a little bit different. I'm going to lay down my life for her and lay down my preferences. And so I think that's another example that comes to mind.
That's awesome. I mean, that one right there is huge because a lot of times as men, we have this idea that we should lead our family. And a lot of times that then gives way to us thinking that it means I can make whatever decision I want and everybody needs to get behind it.
Yeah.
And it's just awesome to see you thinking through as you're leading, even in schedules and decisions and where you're going to spend your time. How can I put her desires above my own? That's
What
huge.
allows her to flourish.
Right.
And now let's make sure our schedules match to that. That's
sure.
great.
Yeah, that's the type of leadership that is worth following. And so it's awesome just for me to hear and for other guys who are listening to be hearing. And that's awesome.
Yeah, another example on just one thing, just to give another example for men that are listening or watching, is my wife doesn't like to grocery shop. So I've just picked that up. I'm like, give me your list of Cub and give me your list of Costco or wherever grocery
That's
store that we
awesome.
go to. And would I rather do that? No. But that takes, anxiety or burden off of her. Okay, I'll step in.
praise
Because
God,
that
let's
frees
go.
her to mentor younger women or just have some quiet time or just
Yeah.
giving her a chance to refresh her soul
Yeah, for sure.
and just be at peace.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen you guys both do that for your wives. So I'm proud of you.
The other thing that I would add is even like the example of keeping the house in order and making sure it's not a mess and we're living in that can be stressful for Emma for sure. Sometimes it's, hey, let's do this together. Like let's go and let's clean, let's have basically a cleaning party. Let's put on some music. Like it doesn't need to be this drudgery.
Yeah,
like
for
it
sure.
can be fun. And and so I've definitely tried to do that.
Yeah,
Nice.
we have one of those every day when we put Isaiah down, we turn on some music and we go and we pick up the house. So it's a daily routine right now. But
Yeah, you get that fun playlist going and
yeah, and I'm the like neat freak in our house. I'm the one who's like everything has to be clean. And my wife sent me this reel on Instagram like probably a few months ago, and it was this joke about how the wife's the tornado and like she's walking around making a mess and the husband's like following her, picking everything up. So it was just a funny visual of our marriage. But I was like,
Two tornadoes. one putting it apart and one putting it together.
yeah, but no, so you're obviously doing a great job leading your family, but then I know you're also in wealth management. So what does it look like to be on mission in your career?
Yeah. So I think a few things that come to mind of just being on mission, like my mindset going into the day is how am I viewing people? Who am I viewing, or how am I viewing my coworkers? How am I viewing clients? And I want to be viewing them as unique image bearers of the one true God. And having that mindset. And I think like when you think about people in that way, it changes how you talk to them. It changes, it maybe doesn't change the recommendation that you give them for their finances, but it just it it changes the game when you think about them in that context. And so I really try to do that, just in terms of mindset. I'm borrowing this from you, Dino, but I also want to be a thermostat rather than a thermometer. A thermometer walks into a room and adjusts to the temperature of that room, but a thermostat sets the temperature of the room. I really strive to do that, especially at work, and just trying to set the tone of the room that I'm in and what conversations are being had. And so those are a few examples of kind of just mindset. But I think practically, one of the, so when I went through Men of the Kingdom, one of the projects the project that I did at the end of Men of the Kingdom was leading a group of men through the book Tactics by Greg Koukl. And Tactics, he really lays out some really good tactics on how to have good conversations with people, and especially people who maybe don't share your worldview. And so, that group was really awesome in leading that study and leading those men to help them have better conversations, specifically in the workplace. That was kind of our heart behind that project. But then applying that, I want to be intentional about the conversations I'm having with people, specifically my coworkers. So I want to know them and be known by them. So that requires me to be somewhat vulnerable, but also just ask really good questions, show an interest in people, get to know who they are as a person. And then when the opportunity presents itself, go deeper and press into their worldview. And that can be really hard. And
especially in our culture right now.
In our culture, yeah, for sure. But I'll tell you guys, like, it's real. There are a lot of, especially during the month of June when we're recording this, there's a lot going on in our culture that can create controversy, or that is controversial, and that people have strong opinions about, and that sort of thing. And so even pressing into that kind of thing, and I haven't had any conversations like that yet this month, but I can imagine that there might be some opportunities in the future to talk with people more. But yeah, those are just a few thoughts of how I view that mission field.
Yeah.
Yeah, our culture puts a kind of like a cone of silence around if you disagree with the flow from the culture. But conflict doesn't always can bring division. Conflict can bring clarity as well. Yeah. And if you can ask the right questions and have an idea that the other person is valuable and you're asking questions that's honoring to them. So there's a way to navigate those conversations.
Yes.
And I just believe there's spiritual warfare around those issues to tamp down anybody who's willing to step out onto the field on that, on those issues. So I appreciate your courage on that.
Yeah.
I know you talked a lot about your mindset and how that impacts the way in which you work and treat your coworkers and view them and even your clients. What fruit have you seen kind of come from that mentality in your conversations and interactions with your coworkers?
One is I have some good friends at work. Like, I think people enjoy being around me, hopefully, and I enjoy being around them. And I think that's one fruit that's been really, really cool. Has just been like, I enjoy the people who I work with, and I have good relationships with the people who I work with, and so.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's
awesome.
one.
Relationships matter. Relationships are the best way to make an impact, and so
yes,
it's
they're
awesome
the thing
you're
that
doing
transcend different times of your life.
Yeah,
houses will come and go, and cars will come and go.
Yep.
But the who is always more important than the what or the where.
Absolutely.
And those the who and those relationships of life, that's what transcends the moments.
Yes.
And that will really be that will be the aroma of your life that you'll continue to think about and you enjoy. How have you seen God move in some of your mission fields? Specifically, I'm thinking, the young adults at Grace, and you've led a couple different Men of the Kingdom moments. Yeah. And I think when we see God moving in those mission fields, it's almost like God saying, hey, good job, Nathan. Now go faster, go farther, keep going.
Yeah.
Where have you been encouraged by God moving in that mission field?
Yeah. So I've been a part of the young adults ministry for 4 years now. And over the span of 4 years, it has been super rewarding to see the men step up and lead.
Like, can you give me a couple examples?
Yeah,
of that?
absolutely.
I would agree with you. That's
so there's a couple guys who come to mind who, when I met them, they are different men today than they were then. It's like the transformation and the way that the Lord has worked in them is amazing. And so just being able to witness that over the course of a few years now has been really, really cool. And just seeing men reject passivity and step up and lead. And in leading a Men of the Kingdom group last summer, I'm super excited to lead a group this summer as well. Just seeing guys who really get it, and they're like, okay, yeah, I don't want to be passive. I want to accept this responsibility that's been given to me, and I want to lead. And then seeing guys actually go and lead and step out in faith and be obedient to the Lord is super, super cool to see.
You have a couple examples of that? Because I think that would be encouraging
Yes.
just for other people to hear as well.
One example, Will, you know him. I feel like he's the type of friend who I feel like I've known for like several years, but in reality, we've only been friends for a couple. And the way that he has stepped up as a leader in our ministry is amazing. Just the way that he leads other men, the spiritual multiplication that he's had in his life is amazing. The way that he's leading now his fiance toward marriage, and he's a really good example of a man who's living on mission.
100% agree.
Yeah, who I've had the pleasure of spending some time with and having an influence on. So that's been really cool.
Yeah. I'm super. I'm proud of you because I've seen you step up and lead. And what's amazing now, the people that you have led are now stepping up and leading. You've had a group from last year's Men of the Kingdom that went ahead and started another Men of the Kingdom group at a college environment.
Yes.
So you're like the living embodiment of 2 Timothy 2.
Yeah.
Where you are leading other godly men that are leading other godly men.
Yeah.
So, I see that as just huge
You're
breakthroughs.
the leading domino for it, which is the really cool thing.
But the Holy Spirit's the one that kicks those dominoes over.
I know, but I'm just saying it's cool to see the replicative impact and like Jesus' great commission, go and make disciples of all nations, teaching and baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Like that's happening and we're doing that. And it's happening from one generation to the next. And you're seeing the ripple effects from one man to the next man. And it's like, those are just a couple examples in the short conversation we've had this morning. And it's like, imagine if that catches wind in so many other guys' lives who are listening. It's like the ripple effect that has as they go and make disciples and live on mission is just exponential.
Yep.
Yeah, you think of where you've stepped out of your comfort zone to lead. The whole, God plus one's always a majority. And as you're leading multiple generations, as John is talking about, those men will now influence others. Yep. And that's something will absolutely echo into eternity. Based on the efforts where you've been faithful in the moment, God is going to bless it with fruit that will glorify his name for multiple generations. There's a life worth living on mission right there.
And it's cool because it's multiplication. It's not just addition. It's not just like you made one new disciple. It's you made one disciple who will make 10 more disciples.
Yes.
As an investment guy, that works, right?
That works. So you can tell me all about that because you're the wealth management guy. But
it's so true though, and I think that it can feel overwhelming when we look out in the culture, and it's like, man, there's a lot of work to do. But all it takes is just a few men who say, I'm going to step up and lead. I'm going to be living on mission. And you're right, the multiplication effect from that can be exponential at a certain point. I think of the French Huguenots. You could probably talk more in detail about this, but from what I've learned from you, it was just a small group of men who sat around a table in what state? What was it?
It's down in South Carolina.
Down in South Carolina.
Well, they came from France.
They came from France. Yeah.
Went to
but
South
they were
Carolina.
in South Carolina, and it was just a few men around a table who were living on mission. They were living in obedience to the Lord. And through their faithfulness and through their obedience, the ripple effect is you can see the legacy of the French Huguenots, and it's
either a quarter or a third of the U.S. presidents have flown from their obedience.
yes,
The group that left France started in South Carolina, and their lineage, their impact on our nation is gigantic. You also see the same thing with Jonathan Edwards, but
yeah,
if you get me talking about Jonathan Edwards, I think we're going to run out of time.
yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And even you just think about some of the few great men who started the Reformation. And it was like, there's just a handful of these guys, but the ripple effect and the way that God used them, you just never know when you step out in obedience, how the Lord is going to use that.
Yeah.
It's so,
Amen.
It's really cool.
So, do you have any advice for men out there right now that are thinking about living on mission? If you're looking into their eyes, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. So I think when we think about our mission fields, I've heard a pastor, his name is Paul Washer. I've heard him describe it this way: we have concentric circles of concern. So if you draw a circle and then you draw another circle around that, draw another circle around that one, and you kind of view it that way of you have your mission field that goes out, but you are in the middle. And it doesn't sound very Christian-like to say that you're in the center of anything, but in this sense, you should be viewing that you need to be leading yourself first. The
Good
greatest the greatest need of my wife is for me to be a more godly husband and a more Christ-like husband. And so and the people at work, like their greatest need, really, whether they know it or not, is that I would be more Christ-like in their interactions with me, at least. And so my advice for any man who's looking to be on mission is take your walk with the Lord seriously. Like truly prioritize spiritual disciplines of being in prayer and begging the Lord to transform your heart and transform your mind, and make you a man on mission. A lot of times,
So good.
A lot of times it's like, I don't want to be doing this on my own strength. I want to be asking the Lord to transform me. I want to have that humility. I think the other thing is being in the Word and letting the Word saturate our minds and our hearts and transform us. Being in community, being around men of the Word, other godly men who are encouraging us to be living on mission. That's super vital. Like, get yourself around godly guys who love the Word of God and are being obedient to the Word of God. I think those are some things that we can do, and they should ultimately lead to we should strive to be delighting in the Lord, delighting in who He is. And I think that really has protected me from just like checking the box of, oh, I prayed today, I read my Bible, I had my small group this week, that type of thing. But it's like, am I delighting in the Lord? Am I delighting in who He is? Am I worshiping the Lord? So that would be one, my recommendation, or a couple recommendations. I think the other thing is to take sin really seriously in your life. Like, I've heard the phrase, be killing sin or it will be killing you.
John Owen,
yes. And it's so true. And I've seen that in my life of just waging war on the sin in your life and taking it seriously. And even just looking at the Beatitudes of blessed are those who mourn. And what that means is you're mourning over your sin. And does sin have an effect on us? And obviously we can think of some of the big sins, like sexual impurity and those types of things, but also in the small things. Like, am I coveting other people's things? Like, am I jealous of other people, of what they have, and I want that? Am I gossiping? Am I being prideful? That's super hard to see when you're being prideful. But like, self-examination is super important in all of that. The other thing with taking sin seriously and killing sin is the foundation that we lay now, as for me as a younger man, and for probably a lot of guys who are listening to this, who are in their earlier years of life, the foundation that you set now will have ripple effects into the future. And who you are now, in a lot of ways, is who you'll probably be when you're older, or who you're going to become. So what are you feeding? What are you cultivating? Are you cultivating sin in your life, and or are you cultivating holiness in your life? Because whatever we're feeding and whatever we're cultivating is probably what's going to grow in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's
Those are
both
some big
hopeful and
questions.
scary at the same time.
Yeah, it's big
yeah.
questions to be thinking about. Are we cultivating sin, or are we cultivating holiness? And
Yes.
I mean, that other idea that you touched on is really, in order to be the best leader, you have to be the best follower, and following Jesus, and actively in love with Jesus, and delighting in Jesus. And
Yeah.
I love that idea. It's a big idea.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So we ask a couple of questions, as we kind of wrap it up. Is there any books that you would recommend to men out there that have formed, kind of the way that you live life on mission?
Yeah. So there's two books that I want to recommend. One is Thoughts for Young Men by J.C. Ryle. It is, I just read that book, and it is one of those books. It's only 75 pages long, so it's a short read. It's probably one of those books that I need to circle back to every year, but it is so good and encouraging. It can apply to, the title is Thoughts for Young Men, but it could apply to young men or older men, or frankly, women too, could read this book and get something out of it. What he lays out in the book is so good, so encouraging, so challenging in a lot of ways. One of the ideas that I really took away from the book is, as young men especially, I think we can view our life like we're always going to be alive. We're never going to die. There will always be tomorrow. And one of the things that he points out is, like, one of the pitfalls of younger men is to think that, but we need to understand, like, tomorrow is not guaranteed. We need to take action today. We can't be waiting around. And so we need to be making the most of the time that the Lord has given to us, not knowing when that time will come when we die. And so that's a really big idea, I know, but that's just an example of something that J.C. Ryle talks about in that book. So it's like, maybe that's not the best selling point of, like, yeah, he's going to talk about how you die.
Well,
but it's
scriptural.
And I will say,
God help us to number our days so we could be wise and live in them. That's Moses. And
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And just, it's packed with wisdom. Again, it's a 75-page book, but it's pretty meaty. So I encourage that one. The other book that I would recommend is Valley of Vision. And it is a book, but it's a collection of prayers from Puritans. And it is one of the most amazing books that I think any Christian could own. I think it should be owned by every Christian, and they should open it, because you read some of these prayers and you pray some of these prayers, and it's just like so nourishing to my soul, and it elevates my. It raises my game a little bit. I'm like, I want to be like these men. Like, these men, they were so in tune with the Lord, and it's evident in their prayer. And so I would really recommend that book, Valley of Vision. And it's, a collection of Puritan prayers.
nice.
That's awesome. Well, Nathan, it's been awesome having you on our podcast today. I truly believe that it's going to be a blessing to all those who are listening to it, and it's just really encouraging to me personally just to hear the way you're living on mission each and every day in all of your different mission fields. It's been a gift, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
for having
Nathan.
me on.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.